Tonight may look ordinary from the outside. The same walls. The same phone in your hand. The same room around you. The same thoughts you have carried for days. But something may happen tonight that makes you stop and wonder why it happened at exactly the moment you needed it. It may arrive quietly. A name you suddenly remember. A message you did not expect. A conversation that takes an unusual turn. A dream that feels strangely vivid. A verse that speaks directly to something you have been carrying privately. Or a sudden peace about a situation that has confused you for far too long. And when it happens, remember these words. Pay attention. Because sometimes the most important signs are not dramatic enough to frighten us. They are quiet enough that we almost dismiss them. You may have been asking God for clarity. You may have prayed about a person. You may have asked whether you should stay, leave, wait, speak, forgive, begin again, or finally close a chapter that has exhausted your heart. And perhaps the hardest part has not been the waiting. The hardest part has been wondering whether your prayers were heard at all. But tonight, instead of looking for something spectacular, look for something clear. Because God does not always answer confusion by giving you every detail of the future. Sometimes He gives you the next step. And that one step changes everything. There is something you need to understand before tonight is over. Not every closed door was punishment. Some doors closed because you were trying to enter a place that could not carry the person you were becoming. Think about that. There were situations you desperately wanted to work. People you wanted to understand you. Plans you thought had to succeed. You prayed for certain outcomes because you believed losing them would destroy you. Yet somehow, you survived what you once thought you could never survive. That itself should tell you something. You are standing on the other side of prayers that were answered differently than you expected. And now another decision is approaching. This time, however, you are not the same person. Tonight's sign may reveal that. You have changed. You have learned what peace feels like, which means you can finally recognize what constantly steals it. You have learned what genuine effort looks like, which means inconsistent attention no longer impresses you. You have learned the difference between words and actions. And perhaps most importantly, you have learned that constantly forcing something does not automatically make it meant for you. That realization is going to matter. Because the sign you receive tonight may not tell you to chase something. It may tell you to stop chasing. It may not tell you to prove yourself. It may remind you that what is truly aligned with your life should not require you to abandon your dignity just to keep it. There is a person or situation you have been analyzing more than you admit. One moment gives you hope. The next creates doubt. One day everything seems possible. The next day you wonder whether you imagined the entire connection. You keep searching for one final piece of information that will settle your heart. But what if the pattern itself is information? What if the confusion has already been speaking? Tonight, notice what brings clarity instead of adrenaline. That distinction is powerful. Because anxiety can sometimes feel like intuition when we desperately want an answer. Fear can sound urgent. Hope can make us interpret everything as confirmation. But genuine wisdom has a different quality. It does not need to scream. It settles. It reveals. It brings something into focus. And tonight, you may experience one of those moments. Something that has seemed complicated may suddenly look simple. You may realize, I already knew. That could be the sign. Not new information. Recognition. And there is another reason tonight matters. You have been carrying something that was never supposed to become your permanent identity. Maybe disappointment. Maybe rejection. Maybe loneliness. Maybe regret over something you wish you had done differently. You replay the moment and imagine another version of yourself making another decision. But listen carefully. You cannot build tomorrow while constantly negotiating with yesterday. There comes a moment when healing requires you to stop asking why the past did not become what you wanted and start asking what the future is inviting you to become. Tonight could be that moment. And the surprising part is that the sign may come through something extremely ordinary. You might hear a sentence in a conversation that stays with you. You might open something and find words that answer a question you never told anyone. You might suddenly feel compelled to check on someone. You might remember a promise you made to yourself months ago. Or you might simply sit in silence and realize that something you were terrified of losing no longer controls you. That is not a small thing. Sometimes the miracle is not that the situation changes. Sometimes the miracle is that you do. And when you change, the situation loses the power it once had. There is a reason you have felt uncomfortable lately. Something inside you is refusing to return to an old version of your life. You may have tried to convince yourself that you could tolerate certain things again. But you cannot unlearn what experience has taught you. Once you recognize manipulation, peace feels different. Once you recognize genuine love, half-hearted attention feels different. Once you recognize your worth, constantly begging to be chosen feels different. And once you understand that God can rebuild what disappointment destroyed, endings stop looking like death sentences. They start looking like redirection. That may be tonight's first revelation. The thing you thought was being taken from you may actually have been making room for something healthier. But there is more. Because there is another kind of sign you need to watch for tonight. Repeated confirmation. Not superstition. Not random numbers that you force into a meaning. Not every coincidence becoming a prophecy. Real confirmation is when truth keeps returning through different directions. A conversation confirms something you have been thinking. Then circumstances reinforce it. Then your own conscience becomes clearer. Then a door either opens naturally or refuses to open no matter how aggressively you push. Pay attention to patterns. Especially patterns involving people. Someone can apologize beautifully and still repeat the behavior. Someone can promise change and continue creating the same wound. Someone can tell you that you matter while consistently treating you as optional. Words can create hope. Patterns reveal reality. And tonight, God may not send you another promise about that person. The sign may be the pattern finally becoming impossible to ignore. That realization could save you months, perhaps years, of emotional exhaustion. But before you assume this message is only about walking away, understand something else. Sometimes the sign tells you to stay. Sometimes you have been preparing to abandon something simply because progress became difficult. Not every difficult season means you are in the wrong place. Some worthwhile things require patience. The question is whether the difficulty is producing growth or destroying you. Healthy difficulty strengthens character. Unhealthy cycles repeatedly erase your peace. Learn the difference. Because tonight's sign may involve exactly that distinction. There may be something worth fighting for that you almost surrendered because results were slower than expected. A dream. A project. A relationship that contains genuine mutual effort. A personal transformation. Something you started with excitement but nearly abandoned when nobody applauded the beginning. Tonight you may receive a reminder of why you started. And if that happens, don't dismiss it. Some seeds spend a long time underground before anyone sees evidence of life. Silence does not always mean nothing is happening. Sometimes roots are forming where applause cannot reach. You have spent too much time judging your progress by what other people can see. But some of your greatest victories have happened privately. Nobody saw you choose not to respond the way you once would have. Nobody saw you walk away from temptation. Nobody saw the nights you wanted to quit but continued. Nobody saw you rebuilding your confidence after somebody made you question it. Nobody saw how difficult it was to remain kind without becoming naive. But God saw every hidden battle. And those battles changed you. This is why tonight is not simply about receiving something. It may be about recognizing who you have become. There is a version of you from 1 year ago who would be amazed that you survived certain things. That version of you feared outcomes you are currently living beyond. Remember that when fear tells you the future is impossible, fear has been wrong before. And now we reach the part of this message that may hit differently. There is one prayer you have almost stopped praying. You used to pray it frequently. Then disappointment made you quieter. You still want the answer, but you became afraid to hope with the same intensity. Because hoping deeply creates the possibility of being disappointed deeply. So you began protecting yourself. You told yourself you no longer cared. But somewhere beneath that defense, the desire remained. Tonight, something may touch that exact prayer. Not necessarily the complete answer. Perhaps only evidence that the story is still moving. A small opening. An unexpected opportunity. A conversation. An idea. A renewed desire. A moment where you suddenly see a path that was invisible before. When that happens, do not demand the entire staircase. Take the next step. God often gives enough light for movement without giving enough information for complete control. And that can be frustrating. Because you want certainty. You want names. Dates. Outcomes. Guarantees. You want to know that if you move, everything will work exactly as imagined. But faith has never been complete control disguised as spirituality. Faith is movement when you have enough truth for the next step, even though the entire road remains unseen. Tonight may challenge your need to know everything before doing anything. Perhaps you already know what conversation you need to have. Perhaps you know what habit must end. Perhaps you know what application needs to be submitted. Perhaps you know what apology needs to be offered. Perhaps you know what boundary needs to be established. Perhaps you know what dream deserves another attempt. The sign may simply give you courage to finally act. And here is something unexpected. Your next breakthrough may begin with a decision that nobody celebrates. Deleting something. Declining something. Walking away quietly. Starting again privately. Saving money. Changing your routine. Forgiving without reopening the same door. Choosing discipline when nobody is watching. Sometimes destiny does not enter your life with thunder. Sometimes it enters disguised as one small responsible decision. That decision becomes another. Then another. Months later, people call your transformation sudden. But you remember the night it actually began. Could tonight become one of those nights? A night you remember because something finally became clear? There is also someone you may need to release from the responsibility of giving you closure. You have waited for them to explain. To confess. To admit what happened. To acknowledge what they did. You imagined that hearing certain words would finally free you. But your freedom cannot remain dependent on somebody else's honesty. Sometimes closure is realizing you already have enough information. Their silence was information. Their inconsistency was information. Their choices were information. Your healing does not need their permission. Tonight's sign could be the moment you understand that. And when you understand it, something powerful happens. You stop waiting at a door that another person controls. You turn around. And suddenly you notice an entire road behind you. That road has been waiting. This is where the story changes. Because everything you lost taught you something about what you should recognize when something better arrives. The wrong environment taught you what peace should feel like. The wrong relationship taught you what mutual effort should look like. The wrong opportunity taught you what purpose is not. The wrong friendship taught you the value of loyalty. The disappointment was painful, but it educated your discernment. Now you can recognize what younger versions of you would have overlooked. That is preparation. And preparation often feels like delay while you are living through it. Tonight, before you sleep, there may be a moment when your mind becomes unusually quiet. Use it. Instead of asking only, God, when will you give me what I want? Ask something deeper. God, show me what I need to see. That prayer can change everything. Because sometimes what you need to see is an opportunity. Sometimes it is a warning. Sometimes it is your own behavior. Sometimes it is a person who has quietly supported you while you remained focused on someone who barely noticed you. Sometimes it is a gift inside you that you keep postponing. Sometimes it is the fact that the life you keep praying for requires habits you keep avoiding. And sometimes the answer is simply, wait. Not forever. Just long enough for what you cannot see to become visible. Waiting is difficult because silence creates stories. You begin imagining the worst. You assume nothing is moving. But unseen does not mean inactive. Consider how many things had to happen before certain people entered your life. How many decisions had to intersect? How many places had to change? How many seemingly unrelated events had to align? You only saw the moment of arrival. You did not see the preparation. So if something has not arrived yet, do not automatically assume it has been denied. But also do not use faith as an excuse to remain trapped in something clearly unhealthy. Wisdom requires both patience and discernment. That is why tonight's sign matters. You are not simply asking for what you want. You are asking for clarity about what is right. And those are different prayers. Now listen closely. There is one more revelation hidden inside this message. The sign may not be about somebody coming into your life. It may be about you finally returning to yourself. Somewhere along the way, you became so focused on being understood that you stopped listening to your own heart. You became so focused on keeping peace with everyone else that you created war inside yourself. You said yes when you meant no. You remained silent when something hurt. You accepted less because you feared losing everything. And slowly, your own voice became unfamiliar. Tonight, God may remind you of who you were before fear started negotiating your standards. Not the naive version of you. The alive version. The version that dreamed. The version that believed possibilities existed beyond one person, one job, one failure, one season. That person is still there. And perhaps the greatest sign tonight is that hope returns. Not reckless hope. Stronger hope. Hope with wisdom. Hope with boundaries. Hope that understands that a closed door can be mercy. Hope that understands that delay can become preparation. Hope that understands that rejection can redirect. Hope that knows one person's inability to recognize your value does not determine your value. And if tears come tonight, let them. Not every tear means you are breaking. Sometimes tears appear because something that has been trapped inside you is finally leaving. You have carried enough. You do not need to solve your entire future tonight. You do not need to understand every person. You do not need to predict every outcome. You only need enough clarity for your next faithful step. And when the sign comes, test it against truth. Does it lead toward wisdom? Does it produce peace rather than obsession? Does it encourage integrity? Does it require you to betray your values, or does it strengthen them? Does it make you healthier, kinder, wiser, more courageous? Those questions matter. Because genuine direction does not need you to destroy yourself to follow it. Tonight may become a dividing line. Before tonight, you were waiting. After tonight, you begin moving. Before tonight, you were questioning your worth. After tonight, you understand that rejection cannot define you. Before tonight, you kept replaying the past. After tonight, you finally begin preparing for what comes next. And what comes next may surprise you. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because you become ready. Ready to recognize the right opportunity. Ready to stop entertaining the wrong one. Ready to receive love without begging for it. Ready to build without needing immediate applause. Ready to walk through doors you once felt unqualified to enter. Ready to accept that your story did not end where somebody left you. There are chapters still unwritten. There are conversations you have not had. Places you have not seen. people you have not met, versions of yourself you have not become. One painful chapter convinced you that you knew the ending. You don't. Tonight, remember that. And when something unusual catches your attention, don't panic. Don't force meaning onto everything either. Simply become present. Observe. Pray. Listen. Sometimes the sign is not hidden in the extraordinary. It is hidden in what suddenly becomes undeniable. Maybe tonight you finally admit that you are tired of accepting less. Maybe you finally recognize that somebody has been genuinely showing up for you. Maybe you realize the dream you buried still matters. Maybe you understand why one door had to close. Maybe you forgive yourself. Maybe you decide to try again. Maybe you finally stop running back to something simply because it is familiar. Whatever the moment is, remember. Clarity creates responsibility. Once you know better, the next step belongs to you. God can reveal the door. You still have to decide whether you will walk through it. And perhaps that is why this message reached you tonight. Not to make you afraid of missing some mysterious event, but to make you awake to what your life has already been trying to teach you. You have survived enough to know that endings are not always endings. You have learned enough to recognize patterns. You have grown enough to make a different choice. And tonight, you may receive the confirmation that finally connects everything. The disappointment. The waiting. The unanswered questions. The unexpected detour. The person who left. The opportunity that disappeared. The strange restlessness you have felt lately. Pieces that seemed unrelated may suddenly form a picture. And when they do, you may finally understand. You were not being forgotten. You were being redirected. You were not being emptied without purpose. Space was being created. You were not losing every battle. Some battles were teaching you what you would need for the next season. So tonight, release the need for a dramatic miracle and become attentive to a meaningful one. A changed mind can be a miracle. A restored hope can be a miracle. A courageous decision can be a miracle. A peaceful goodbye can be a miracle.